So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. This is my weekly show at 6:30 p.m. Pacific, where I take clips. I think today it's exclusively from Sunday talking head news pundit shows on the cable and network news programs. And then I show you clips and I give you my commentary, and then at the end I look in the discussion section at what you, the live viewers, have been posting, and hopefully get a little bit of live discussion going on the breaking news of the day, the important events that they talk about on the Sunday morning news shows. I see that we have some people joining, I think, here. Let's check it out. Yeah. We got some viewers showing up, which is good to see. If you could just post whether you can see and hear me. For new viewers, this I also wanted to let you know that I will be playing, I think, or for all viewers, this is going to be about an hour show instead of the usual half hour. I have over 20 clips to play, and I'm hoping that I will have some good discussion going. Most of the clips, I think I have about 16 clips on the NSA spying deal, and of course the breaking news about Edward Snowden fleeing Hong Kong and going to Moscow, and apparently planning to move on to Ecuador. And unfortunately, most of the news shows that I take clips from they didn't show the or they were recorded before it was known that he was actually going to Ecuador. Originally, they were talking about him they were actually talking about him going to Venezuela or possibly Cuba, and you'll see that shows up in some of the clips where people are talking about him going to Venezuela or possibly Cuba rather than Ecuador, which is where it looks like he's actually going to end up. But I did want to play you one clip. There's this new show, and here, sorry for the clicking. I have to get everything set up here. Let me see, get my LiberalViewer Sunday. Okay, so there's this new show called Disrupt with Karen Finney that they just happened to be the show that was broadcasting live after it was known that Edward Snowden was going to Ecuador. And so I wanted to show a clip from that show where they have a former federal prosecutor talking about what are the implications for extraditing Edward Snowden if he ends up in Ecuador, and you can see that in this clip.
Well, immediately as we sit here, the United States government is trying to put pressure on the Russian government to deport him. His U.S. passport has been revoked. The Russians have the discretion to turn him over to the United States. That doesn't appear to be in the cards. And so the question is, how can he seek asylum in Ecuador? How can the Ecuadorians take physical control of him, and how can he physically get to Ecuador? That can only happen if the Russians are the handmaidens of this process. Once he gets to Ecuador, if he gets there, the U.S. has very limited options. There's a U.S.-Ecuador extradition treaty that goes back to the 1870s. The Ecuador government can only extradite him if he's been charged in the United States with a crime that is also a crime under Ecuadorian law. And if he's charged with an offense that in the Ecuadorian government's judgment constitutes a political offense, and many think that Snowden's conduct does, then they have a way out of extraditing him to the United States, and he could stay there for the rest of his life.
So that guy's a former federal prosecutor, David Laufman, I think was his name, and so he obviously has more experience with extradition. I was a criminal defense attorney, but I never dealt with any international extradition. The only extradition I ever dealt with was state to state. I did, however, read the U.S. extradition treaty with Ecuador. Most of it was actually from like the 1870s, I think, and then there was this 1934 update. And the 1934 update, though none of it includes espionage as a crime, it does include theft of government property or embezzlement of government property. And that's one of the things that Edward Snowden is charged with. Of course, as a lawyer, I know that the fact that one of the things Edward Snowden is charged with matches possibly a crime in the extradition treaty. That's like just the first step along the way, and extradition can also be a very political process. So and have more to do with government policy than with what's written in the extradition treaty. So I'm not giving any sort of legal opinion on that, but I thought that was an interesting analysis from that former federal prosecutor about the implications of Edward Snowden possibly ending up in Ecuador. And also right now it seems he's still in Russia, and there's the possibility of him not getting to Ecuador. I guess what that former federal prosecutor was saying there was that he thinks the American government is currently putting a lot of pressure on Russia to stop him from going to Ecuador and to turn him over. Although I noticed on Fox News Sunday, I'm going to play you a clip, Bill Kristol explained why he thinks that Edward Snowden stopped in Moscow on his way to wherever he's going, and I think he made one interesting point that you can see in this clip.
I spoke with one former intelligence official this morning, and I said, "What's up with this, do you think?" And he said, "Look, but there are a million flights from Hong Kong to Ecuador or Venezuela or Iceland or the other places that he wants to go. Why Moscow?" And the guy said, "Look, think about it for a minute. Interpol may well have a warrant out for this guy. Presumably we have asked Interpol to keep an eye out for him traveling. That's what you normally do when you're pursuing a fugitive abroad. But so it's the airline as much as the place. It's Aeroflot, which is a Russian government-controlled airline, which would not, when it lands in the Moscow airport, presumably serve some kind of arrest warrant. Whereas if you're taking British Airways or something, they might do that. So it is interesting that the Russian government is basically colluding, it seems, with the Chinese government and with whatever place he's going to end up to avoid us being able to bring this guy to justice."
Yeah, we should.
So that's an interesting point, that one of the reasons he went through Moscow is because of Aeroflot, the totally government-controlled airline that Edward Snowden could get assurances from Putin or whoever that he was not going to get stopped along the way. And, there was this other clip that I want to play you from Representative Mike Rogers, this Republican. He's a former FBI agent. I believe is he chairman of the House Intelligence Committee? I believe he is. I could be wrong about that. But he also commented on Edward Snowden going into Russia, and he seemed to think that it was all part of a Russian conspiracy of bad behavior that you can see him talk about in this clip.
Putin has been playing a thorn in the world side in Syria. We think that they may not be playing honest with their adherence to the nuclear treaty. They're very aggressive around the world trying to regain their influence. They've modernized their nuclear fleet. Listen, Russia is a country that wants to get back on the world stage, and I don't think they really care if they do it in a way that's in the best interests of good citizenship around the world. This shouldn't surprise us. They have a very aggressive intelligence operation in the United States. I'm sure they would love to have a little bit of coffee and a few conversations with Mr. Snowden. That's why this is so serious, and why we need to be so aggressive about making sure that people understand the difference between somebody who betrays their country and gives secrets away that will protect American lives at the expense for whatever he hopes to gain in the company of the Russians, in the company of the Chinese intelligence services, in the company of what you can only imagine is Cuban and Venezuelan intelligence services.
Senator Durbin.
So that's an example of what I was talking about, where people are talking about Cuban and Venezuelan intelligence services, because this was before the breaking news, apparently, that he's going to Ecuador. But what that right-wing Republican former FBI agent there was saying about Edward Snowden not being a whistleblower but being a criminal, I don't think that everyone shares that point of view, and I actually wanted to go to a clip from wait, hold on, let's see, whistleblower, FISA opinion, the Glenn Greenwald, who was the reporter who works for The Guardian in Great Britain, who was the main person to whom Edward Snowden leaked this information, along with, he also leaked it to the Washington Post. He talked about he had I think the best kind of story from the Sunday shows this morning was this spat he had with David Gregory, and you'll see the first clip doesn't really show the spat, but he got like progressively more perturbed or more confrontational with David Gregory as the interview went on, but the first thing Glenn Greenwald said in his interview with David Gregory was he compared a whistleblower to a criminal, and why he said that he thought that Edward Snowden is a whistleblower and not a criminal, and you can see that in this clip.
Sure. I think the key definition of whistleblower is somebody who brings to light what political officials do in the dark that is either deceitful or illegal. And in this case, there's a New York Times article just this morning that describes that one of the revelations that he enabled, that we reported, is that the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, went before the U.S. Congress and lied outright when asked whether or not the NSA is collecting any form of data on millions of Americans. His response, Director Clapper's response, was, "No, sir." As the New York Times said today, even Clapper has had to say that that statement was absolutely false. And the very first conversation I ever had with Mr. Snowden, he showed me the folder in which he had placed the documents and labeled it NSA lying to Congress, that proved, as we reported, that the NSA is bulk collecting the phone records of millions of Americans indiscriminately, exactly what Clapper denied to the Congress was being done. As for illegality, the New York Times also said today that the bulk spying program exceeds the Patriot Act, and there's a FISA court opinion that says that the U.S. government, that the NSA, engaged in unconstitutional and illegal spying on American citizens. That court opinion is secret, but he showed me documents discussing internally in the NSA what that court ruling is, and that should absolutely be public.
So, I mean, I think that is an important difference between a whistleblower and a criminal, and there should be protections for whistleblowers. And then that thing that Glenn Greenwald said about at the end about this FISA opinion finding that, or the FISA court opinion finding that some NSA spying had actually violated the Constitution. That, I mean, it would be great to be able to read that opinion, and there's something really Kafkaesque about it being a secret opinion showing violations of the law that people never get to hear about. And David Gregory asked Glenn Greenwald about that, and he said, and he asked a question of Glenn Greenwald about whether the fact that the FISA court found unconstitutional behavior by the NSA, does that show that there's actually a judicial check on the NSA spying? And you can see the beginnings of Glenn Greenwald's confrontational attitude towards David Gregory in the beginning of his answer here, talking about how David Gregory is all buddy-buddy with government sources, or implying that in the beginning of his answer to David Gregory's question that you can see in this clip.
I don't know what government officials are whispering to you, David, but I know that the documents that I have in my possession and that I have read from the NSA tell a much different story, which is that there was an 80-page opinion from the FISA court that said that what the NSA is doing in spying on American citizens is a violation of both the Fourth Amendment and the bounds of the statute. And it specifically said that they are collecting bulk transmissions, multiple conversations from millions of Americans, not just people that are believed to be involved in terrorist organizations or working for a foreign agent, and that this is illegal. And the NSA then planned to try and accommodate that ruling. But I think the real issue as journalists and as citizens is, why should we have to guess? How can we have a democracy in which a secret court rules that what the government is doing in spying on us is a violation of the Constitution and the law, and yet we sit here and don't know what that ruling is because it's all been concealed and all been secret? I think we need to have transparency and disclosure, and that's why Mr. Snowden stepped forward, so that we could have that.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with what Glenn Greenwald said there. But I pointed out how at the beginning of his discussion there of this secret FISA court opinion that found unconstitutional behavior on the part of the NSA spying program, at the beginning he talks about how David Gregory is getting whispers in his ear from government sources that's changing his coverage. But the reason I say that is because what happened later is it, or it's like the question after next, David Gregory asks him whether by receiving and possibly aiding and abetting Edward Snowden is Glenn Greenwald committing a crime, which is something that some people have been raising. And that's where the real spat begins between the two of them that you can see in this clip.
To the extent that you have aided and abetted Snowden, even in his current movements, why shouldn't you, Mr. Greenwald, be charged with a crime?
I think it's pretty extraordinary that anybody who would call themselves a journalist would publicly muse about whether or not other journalists should be charged with felonies. The assumption in your question, David, is completely without evidence, the idea that I've aided and abetted him in any way. The scandal that arose in Washington before our stories began was about the fact that the Obama administration is trying to criminalize investigative journalism by going through the emails and phone records of AP reporters, accusing a Fox News journalist of the theory that you just embraced, being a co-conspirator with felonies for working with sources. If you want to embrace that theory, it means that every investigative journalist in the United States who works with their sources, who receives classified information, is a criminal. And it's precisely those theories and precisely that climate that has become so menacing in the United States. It's why the New Yorker's Jane Mayer said investigative reporting has come to a standstill, her word, as a result of the theories that you just referenced.
Well, the question of who's a journalist may be up to a debate with regard to what you're doing. And of course, anybody who's watching this understands I was asking a question. That question has been raised by lawmakers as well. I'm not embracing anything, but obviously I take your point. Mr. Greenwald, just state, to the extent that you have...
Now, that was kind of amusing, I guess, that, but it actually didn't even end there. Glenn Greenwald stayed on for a little while there, and he actually had another answer about whether he thought that Edward Snowden had hurt U.S. national security, and I'll play that for you in a minute. But one of the interesting things was that after he left the show, he actually put up a tweet that was really a huge dig at David Gregory of Meet the Press there. And hold on one second, I gotta add in the clips here real quick. And David Gregory, I guess while he was still on the air, he saw the tweet from Glenn Greenwald, and he replied to it on air, and I'll show you that right now in this clip.
Tactics of this, and part of the debate is frankly around journalism, and Glenn Greenwald referenced it when I asked him a question about whether he should or will face charges, which has been raised. And you know, I want to acknowledge there is a debate on Twitter that goes on online about this even as we're speaking, and here's what Greenwald has tweeted after his appearance this morning: who needs the government to try to criminalize journalism when you have David Gregory to do it? And I want to directly take that on, because this is the problem with somebody who claims that he's a journalist, who would object to a journalist raising questions, which is not actually embracing any particular point of view. And that's part of the tactics of the debate here, when in fact lawmakers have questioned him. There's a question about his role in this, the Guardian's role in all of this. It is actually part of the debate. Rather than going after the questioner, he could take on the issues, and he had an opportunity to do that here on Meet the Press.
So I guess that was like the cat fight from the Sunday shows this morning, and I found that kind of amusing, so I thought I would share that with you, even though it's not something I'm going to make a video out of or anything. But the other thing I want to show you is that Glenn Greenwald actually, before he made that tweet, there is another clip of him from Meet the Press before he left. David Gregory brought on Pete Williams, their Justice Department correspondent, who's done really good work, and asked him some questions about Edward Snowden's flight from Hong Kong. And then he asked him to stay on, and asked him if he thought that Edward Snowden had actually hurt American national security. And before I go on to the next clips on the subject, I wanted to show you what Glenn Greenwald said about whether he thought that Edward Snowden had hurt American national security here.
It isn't Edward Snowden who's making the decisions about what is published. He didn't just simply upload these documents to the internet or pass them to adversary governments, which is what he could have done had he been inclined or had his motive been to harm the United States. He came to two newspapers, The Guardian and The Washington Post, and said, I want you to be extremely careful about what it is that you publish and what it is that you don't publish. Only publish what Americans should know, but don't harm national security. And we have withheld the majority of things that he gave us pursuant not only to his instruction, but to our duty as journalists. That's what whistleblowers and journalists do every single day, David. That's how Americans have learned about wrongdoing on the part of the U.S. government, through this process.
All right.
So I think that's an important point to remember, that, I mean, he didn't just publish everything that he stole from the U.S. government. He actually gave it to the Washington Post and the Guardian, and they vetted it and did the job that supposedly journalists are supposed to do as to, you know, whether it's going to hurt national security. And one of the things I thought was interesting about that discussion as to whether Edward Snowden is hurting national security or whether he is helping Americans learn about wrongdoing by their government. You know, I played that earlier clip of Glenn Greenwald saying that Edward Snowden had put together this folder about the NSA lying to Congress. And one of the things that I think, and I even in a, let me see if I can find, I think I have the, for a LiberalViewer Wednesday, I actually put up, I have a clip here of what James Clapper, the NSA director, said last March to the Congress. He was answering a question from Ron Wyden, and this is what Edward Snowden was talking about when he said that NSA had lied to Congress. He was talking about this statement from James Clapper last March to Congress here.
Last summer, the NSA director was at a conference, and he was asked a question about the NSA surveillance of Americans. He replied, and I quote here, "The story that we have millions or hundreds of millions of dossiers on people is completely false." The reason I'm asking the question is, having served on the committee now for a dozen years, I don't really know what a dossier is in this context. So what I wanted to see is if you could give me a yes or no answer to the question, does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly. There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
All right.
Now, that answer, you know, the more I think about it, the more I think that is dishonest. And I've said before that, you know, he's an NSA spy master, so his job isn't always to be honest. Although that guy, I hope he doesn't play poker, because that whole, you know, like scratching the head thing, that's like the worst tell I've ever seen. And his explanation since then is that he was, you know, it was the least untrue answer he could come up with. And there was like an interesting comparison between what James Clapper did there and what Edward Snowden did in leaking the information from, of all people, Libertarian Republican Senator Rand Paul. And he was actually on CNN's State of the Union with Candy Crowley. And he compared the two of them in an interesting way right here.
It's going to be an open question how this young man's judged. I do think that when history looks at this, they're going to contrast the behavior of James Clapper, our National Intelligence Director, with Edward Snowden. Mr. Clapper lied in Congress in defiance of the law in the name of security. Mr. Snowden told the truth in the name of privacy. So I think there will be a judgment because both of them broke the law, and history will have to determine. I do think for Mr. Snowden, if he cozies up to the Russian government, it'll be nothing but bad for his name in history. If he goes to an independent third country like Iceland, and if he refuses to talk to any sort of formal government about this, I think there's a chance that he'll be seen as an advocate of privacy. If he cozies up to either the Russian government, the Chinese government, or any of these governments that are perceived still as enemies of ours, I think that that'll be a real problem for him in history.
Now, that's kind of an interesting analysis there from Rand Paul. And, I hadn't really thought of comparing James Clapper's lie to protect national security to Edward Snowden's truth to protect everybody's privacy. But I don't know. I don't know if that's more of a clever soundbite or a real analysis. I'm still sort of mulling that over myself, but I thought I would play that for you. I got to do a little clicking while I queue up a few more clips I have on the whole NSA spying situation. One thing I wanted to show you, here, let me get this all queued up here. There are a few more clips about sort of the foreign policy implications of the whole NSA spying thing. There was something from Martha Raddatz on This Week with George Stephanopoulos. She talked about, let me see if I can load that, about the real reason that Hong Kong let Edward Snowden go, even though the United States had already asked for an arrest warrant and for Edward Snowden to be extradited, and they filed charges, and they had, from what some of the other people had said on these shows, they had actually gotten assurances that Hong Kong was going to consider the request. And so the fact that that Hong Kong is now letting Edward Snowden leave and go to Moscow, some people in the United States have felt kind of betrayed, I guess, by the actions of China. But there was one analysis I thought was important to look at was what Martha Raddatz said as to why China really did this. And I think it's because it was just too big a problem, especially for the Hong Kong government. And you can see Martha Raddatz. What is going on? Oh, sorry. You can see Martha Raddatz talk about that in this clip.
I don't think it's quite that serious. I think China will move on. Hong Kong will move on. What were they really supposed to do? They have domestic politics as well, especially in Hong Kong. Snowden had created protests in that country. So I think, in effect, China really had to say, let's get rid of this guy. Let's get rid of the problem. He might be here for months and months and months, and that would really complicate things.
Clearly.
So it was really more about China's domestic politics problem, although that didn't stop China from getting criticism. I wanted to show this clip from Richard Haas, who was also on, I think he was on This Week with George Stephanopoulos. And what I thought was interesting about his point, well, first it starts with George Stephanopoulos himself saying something that a couple years ago I think we would have found laughable. He talked about a powerful tweet. And I'll talk about it after I show what Richard Haas has to say in this clip.
President of the Council on Foreign Relations, also author of a new book, Foreign Policy Begins at Home. And Richard, let me begin with you, because you put out a pretty powerful tweet this morning saying that by releasing Snowden, China has thrown away the chance to invest in relations with the United States.
Well, here this is, George, just a couple of weeks after this summit where China talked about a win-win relationship to be a model of relations between major powers of the day. And instead, they've gone for a short-term gain. Plus, it raises real questions whether China is prepared to enter into any sort of regulation of what could be the great area of international competition for the next couple of decades.
So you have no doubt that this was the government of China telling Hong Kong.
There's not a lot of freelancing going on in China. The idea that the Hong Kong authorities did this independently, this to me, inconceivable.
So, I mean, that's probably true, at least, that Hong Kong had to have the approval of the Chinese government before letting Edward Snowden leave. I think that's probably true. But I also think what Martha Raddatz said is true about the fact that this was more about domestic politics and not really some like decision on the part of China to take some short-term gain in hurting the United States. Or I don't know, maybe it was both. I'm not sure, but I think it's important to look at both those analyses. Another important person who was interviewed only on one show, and this also had to do with Hong Kong. This was on This Week with George Stephanopoulos right at the beginning. He got a interview with Keith Alexander, who's basically the head of this NSA spying program and a whole bunch of other NSA programs. And one of the things when we're talking about why didn't Hong Kong do what we wanted, I thought it was interesting to see what General Keith Alexander had to say about whether we follow the laws of Hong Kong. He kind of dodged the question, as I will show you in this clip.
That we have not broken the laws of Hong Kong?
I'm confident that we're following the laws that our country has and doing what we do. We have a set of laws that guide how NSA acts. We follow those laws. We have tremendous oversight by all three portions of the government, the courts, Congress, and the administration. And when you look at these laws and the way they've been passed and the oversight mechanisms that we have, I am confident that we are following our laws.
So he's confident that we're following our laws, but he kind of dodged the question as to whether we're following the laws of Hong Kong. And, you know, one of the things that Edward Snowden leaked is that we do some hacking of China and Hong Kong. You know, I have a couple more NSA spying clips I want to show you, or kind of related. One is from Representative Loretta Sanchez, who's I've always been a fan of Loretta Sanchez because she defeated a Republican congressman here in California named Bob Dornan, who used to represent me when I was growing up before some redistricting moved him down to Orange County. I grew up in southern Los Angeles County. They used to call him B1 Bob, and he was really conservative. And she is a Latina congresswoman, and she sort of represents the changing demographics of California and the United States because even though Orange County is kind of conservative, the growing Latino population of Orange County eventually allowed her to defeat Bob Dornan. And she was asked about the NSA spying issue when she was on the Sunday morning shows this morning, and I thought she made an important point that hopefully I'll be making in one of my upcoming videos about whether Obama should be impeached, or I think that's going to be the title of the video, Impeach Obama. And she talked about how it's really Congress and not even the courts or the president who should be reining in the whole NSA spying situation. And I wanted to let you show what she had to say about that. Oh, hold on, I'm just clicking while I add in a couple extra files. But here's what Loretta Sanchez had to say in this clip.
No, I have not voted in favor of any Patriot Act or any of the FISA amendments or anything else that goes with it, particularly because I have been concerned in this area. You know, I mean, the Supreme Court has been pretty straightforward about the Fourth Amendment. They've let it err on the sense of national security. It's the Congress, actually, who can rein it in, but it's the Congress who's actually allowed it to be much broader and have collection happen. And my biggest point is that not everybody in the Congress is given access to what is really happening. And so when our American public says, hey, we don't know about this, and why are you doing this? I mean, maybe we can't tell everybody in our nation, but you would think that 435 members of the House and 100 senators should have access and ability to understand what the NSA is doing, what all the other agencies, intelligence agencies are doing, and actually have a good debate. And maybe it has to be behind closed doors, but certainly with all deference to our chairman here, he may have information. I doubt he has everything and knows everything.
What about?
But certainly I am limited even when I ask.
So, you know, I already said I like Representative Loretta Sanchez, and I think what she's saying there, that Congress has to assert itself, has to change some of the laws that it passed that authorizes some of this sweeping spying on Americans and on Americans' international communications, that Congress has a responsibility to step up and make sure it's engaging in oversight and amending some of those bad laws that Congress passed. I mean, I think that there's a lot of blame to go around, but people aren't concentrating on that enough. So I definitely agree with that analysis. So one other thing I wanted to show you, it's just sort of related to the NSA spying. There was another clip from the General Keith Alexander, who's sort of in charge of these programs at the NSA. I wanted to show you. I thought was kind of interesting. He's also in charge of cyber attacks, defending us against cyber attacks, and also defending the United States against theft of intellectual property. And it was on that last issue, the theft of intellectual property, he said something kind of interesting I wanted to show you in this clip.
Well, I think our nation has been significantly impacted with intellectual property, the theft of intellectual property by China and others. That is the most significant transfer of wealth in history. And it goes right back to your initial question. Who's taking our information is one of the things I believe the American people would expect me to know.
Now, I'm not sure that the theft of American intellectual property is the greatest transfer of wealth in history. And I actually saw a cool tweet from Harry Shearer, who is a comedian and sort of political commentator also, who I followed and respected for a long time, back from Spinal Tap and a whole bunch of other great movie projects he's been involved in, and all of his voices on The Simpsons. And I felt almost like I was watching the Sunday morning shows with Harry Shearer this morning, because I saw him tweet this. Did General Alexander just say on ABC that China IP theft from U.S. greatest transfer of wealth in history? Greater than colonial plunder? So I thought that was a very prescient comment. I retweeted that. If you can follow me on Twitter, if you followed me on Twitter, you would see that from Harry Shearer this morning. So anyway, so I think I showed you about 16 clips on the whole NSA spying issue there. I also wanted to show you a few clips on the immigration issue. It seems likely that, basically the big news in the last week on the immigration issue is there's this amendment added to put border security on steroids. They're going to spend like $30 billion or maybe even $40 billion on border security. It's going to hire so many agents. You could space them every 250 feet along the border, from what I understand, and it's just like a big sop to the right-wing people who are afraid of immigrants, I think, because immigration, we have net zero immigration at the moment, but I think that there are a lot of Republicans who are really hopeful that this is actually going to pass, but then there are a lot of issues as to why it actually might not pass. And I want to show you just a few clips on First, I want to show you Lindsey Graham. You know, last week I showed a clip of Lindsey Graham saying that if the GOP didn't pass comprehensive immigration reform, it didn't matter who they would run in 2016. They were in some kind of demographic death spiral. And that was kind of, I think, a good soundbite. And then Lindsey Graham is back on Fox News Sunday this morning to basically give the pros of why Republicans must pass comprehensive immigration reform and his optimistic outlook that I'll show you in this clip.
The White House. As to the Republican Party, here's my firm belief. America is not divided on this, Mike. 70% of Americans, including Republicans, support an earned pathway to citizenship over a 13-year period where you get in the back of the line, learn a language, and pay a fine. So to the Republican Party, this is a chance to improve our economy, reduce the deficit by $890 billion, to get border security you'll never see in your lifetime, to regain our sovereignty. And if it fails, and we are blamed for its failure, our party is in trouble with Hispanics, not because we're conservative, but because of the rhetoric and the way we've handled this issue. I want to get reattached to the Hispanic community, sell conservatism, pass comprehensive immigration reform, and grow this party. The party's got to be bigger than Utah and South Carolina. The Hispanic community is very close to our values, but we have driven them away over this issue. Let's fix this problem for the good of the country and for the good of the party, and this bill does that, my friend.
So that's Lindsey Graham's pro-immigration, comprehensive immigration reform talking points on Fox News Sunday. But Fox News Sunday, the reason that Lindsey Graham referred to the Republican Party has to be bigger than South Carolina and Utah is because the other guest on there was the senator, the Republican senator from Utah, Mike Lee. And and Utah is actually I believe the whitest state in the United States, so that may be why he has the least pressure to make any sort of concessions on comprehensive immigration reform. And they're saying that there may be 70 votes in the Senate for comprehensive immigration reform, or maybe even 75. Well, it looks like Mike Lee, senator from Utah, is going to be one of those 25 who is not voting for this, and he sort of explained the minority of Republicans who are against this and their position that you can see in this clip.
Well, look, if we turn immigration reform into a political football, everyone loses, Chris. We all know that. We've learned that from the past, and we don't want to have to learn that the hard way in the future. What the American people want is they want to make sure that our border is secure, and they want to make sure that we've fixed our legal immigration process, especially before we go legalizing, much less granting citizenship to 11 million people, treating all of them the same, regardless of whether they overstayed visas or crossed in illegally in the first place. We have to remember at the end of the day that CBO told us early this week that this will be bad for wages. It'll be bad for unemployment. This is not the right solution.
So that's kind of the anti-immigration reform position, but that's pretty much been the minority position, especially in the Senate. But the question is whether it's going to pass. Once it passes the Senate by 70 or 75 votes, then it has to go to the House of Representatives. And the question then is going to be, is it going to get a majority of Republican votes? And if not, will the Speaker of the House, Boehner, bring it up for a vote, even if it doesn't have a majority vote? And there's actually a Democratic representative, Joaquin Castro, I believe from Texas, addressed that point, what's called the Hastert rule, that from a former Republican speaker, Dennis Hastert, talking about whether the Speaker of the House will bring up for a vote bills that don't have majority support from the majority party of Republicans. That's the so-called Hastert rule, and Representative Joaquin Castro addressed that in this clip.
If the Speaker insists on using the Hastert rule, which essentially says that you've got to have the support of a majority of the majority, which means a majority of Republicans, that means that 25% of the body can control 100% of the agenda and the legislation. It will not pass if he uses the Hastert rule.
I want to move.
So, yeah, I guess, I've heard a lot about the Hastert rule, but I never really thought about it in terms of it lets 25% of the body control 100% of the agenda, but that's really true since the House is pretty evenly split. Allowing just half of the Republicans to decide does give control to just 25%. That's your basic math there. I have one other immigration clip I want to play for you. You know, I try to play mostly newsmakers rather than reporters, although I played a lot of Glenn Greenwald, and I think he's actually become more of a newsmaker than a reporter, though he is obviously both. There was one thing I wanted to show from Chuck Todd, an NBC reporter who does have a lot of inside sources, so I guess he has some good information. And I've been kind of an optimist on comprehensive immigration reform. I thought that it was, you know, obviously going to pass the Senate, but I thought that they weren't going to be that stupid in the House, and to not pass it because it was going to hurt the chances of Republicans in the future with the Latino vote. Not just the Latino vote, basically the entire non-white vote. You know, Mitt Romney lost a lot of the Asian vote, and even I think there are white people like me who don't like that kind of immigration policy. So you lose a lot of votes from that kind of ungenerous view of how to treat people who are coming to this country. And so I thought because of that we were actually going to see some kind of comprehensive immigration reform pass. And so I was kind of sorry to see Chuck Todd, who has a lot of inside info on this, give an analysis a little bit different than that in this clip.
Watching the debacle on the Farm Bill, watching Speaker Boehner bring a bill, the entire leadership bring a bill to the floor that they thought they had the votes for, and they couldn't do it. I do, you know, and it goes to this point you were bringing up with Robert, which is this. I saw the president overseas, essentially neutered, inability to do really much on Syria. There isn't this sense of urgency. How do you get Russia to move off of its support of Assad? Sort of this stalemate that's going there. Inability to use the platform as leader of the free world there. Watching the Speaker of the House totally not being able to lead the House floor, and it makes you wonder, how does immigration get through? The Senate's working. Senate's a lonely, tiny little body here that seems to be working with some sort of diligence here. They're going to get something through. I still think it'll get 70, 75 votes. I'm no longer believing that it can get through the House.
Well, that's it.
So that makes me start feeling a little more pessimistic. I mean, if you go through and watch my live events over the last several weeks, you'll see I started very optimistic about comprehensive immigration reform. I even had some optimism about gun background checks, which actually may still be coming back next month and in years to come even. But to hear Chuck Todd say that he doesn't think comprehensive immigration reform is going to pass the House, I mean, in a way, as a partisan Democrat, that could be good news, because then it's a good issue for the Democratic Party to use against Republicans in the 2014 midterm elections. But, I mean, I'd like to see some sort of comprehensive immigration reform pass, because it's really bad for the 11 million people who have to live in the shadows and not really be able to participate. And, you know, even though the comprehensive immigration reform they're talking about isn't perfect, I think that it's better than nothing. And I mean, I guess we'll see what the end result is, especially this border security is kind of ridiculous. You know, it's more symbol than substance. And anyway, I want to let you see that. Now, I noticed that Chuck Todd was talking about the lack of leadership in all these different areas, and one of the things he talked about was Syria. I didn't want to do an entire, even though I did all those NSA clips, I didn't want to do an entire show without mentioning Syria at all. So I also wanted to show you a clip of Martha Raddatz back on This Week with George Stephanopoulos talking about, she just came back from Syria, and she made an interesting point about what the CIA's been doing in Syria, not just with this latest, you know, now we're going to arm the rebels policy that came after the Obama administration officially said that the Syrian regime, Assad, had used chemical weapons. But she said for some period of time, there's been this relationship with the CIA building and she described that in this clip.
What has been going on for a while is the CIA has been helping train the rebels on heavier weapons. I think you'll see much more of that. That's a way for America to actually vet those rebels. There's still some concern who they would give heavy weapons to. I don't think the United States is going to give those heavy weapons.
Qatar, Saudi Arabia.
Qatar, Saudi Arabia, but we'll help train them so you can look the rebels in the eye and say, these are the guys that we trust. It's as much as we can do at this point to try to change the balance there, because the small arms will really not change the balance in any way. And you've got such a huge problem, which I saw with the refugees, 500,000 in Jordan. That is unsustainable.
Question.
So I thought that was kind of an interesting point from Arthur Raddatz, that the training process is a way for the CIA to vet the rebels and find who it is, who are the good rebels. And especially with the heavy weapons, and she thinks that that may be what's going to turn the tide, because the small arms aren't going to do it. And there was a lot more discussion of Syria on all the shows, but I wanted to concentrate kind of on the NSA spying. But I did want to let you see that one clip, and I also wanted to show you, as long as I'm looking at a few other random issues. One issue I haven't really addressed is the sexual assaults in the military. That's been an ongoing issue. There were hearings a few weeks ago, and there's been these really terrible numbers coming out that even as this issue has gotten more publicity, it's actually been growing in the military. And there was this interesting interview with, let me make sure I get her name right, because it's a Hawaiian name that I'm not that familiar with. He's Representative Tulsi Gabbard from Hawaii, who also served in Iraq, and there was an interesting interview with her that talked about various issues, and one of which was the sexual assaults in the military that you can see discussed in this clip.
The issue of military sexual assault and the skyrocketing numbers that we've seen reported, I think they've shocked all of us. When I was deployed to Iraq, we heard and saw incidents that were being reported, or incidents that were occurring within our camp. We got issued rape whistles so that, as we walk out of our tent or walk out of our hooch, we've got our body armor, we've got our helmet, our weapon, and we've got our rape whistle. It was an eye-opening experience to have to consider that fact when we're serving overseas in Iraq. That just places a greater responsibility on those in leadership to do something about this. We have to do something about this now.
So that is someone who I am glad is serving in Congress, and that factoid about women being issued rape whistles in Iraq, I'd never heard that before. I thought that was definitely worth sharing, so I wanted to add in that sort of a random issue, although I wish I had actually done more coverage of the sexual assault in the military, because I mean, it's kind of disgraceful what's been going on there. I have just a couple more clips, and then I'm going to take comments from the discussion section. I see I've got like 80, 90 people who are watching, and so I'm glad to see that. And I'm hoping to take mostly on-topic comments, which is, by on-topic I mean that discussing the clips that I've been showing here for almost the last hour now. So one issue I wanted to also show that even though I concentrated on the NSA, one interesting thing that happened in the last week that may have really strong economic effects. It's sort of an economic story that is important. I want to make sure I show a clip talking about what Ben Bernanke, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, said this last week that caused sort of a drop in the stock market. And I seem to get a lot of questions about the Federal Reserve during the show, during the live events I do. So basically, he said a couple things. He said that he may eventually stop buying up these bonds, what's called quantitative easing. I talked about that in a few other live events. It's basically where the U.S. prints more money to increase liquidity. That's one of the ways that the Fed can stimulate. The other way the Fed can stimulate is by keeping really low interest rates, which the Fed has already done. And just this idea that the Fed might stop the quantitative easing, the printing of money. It caused this drop in the stock market, and there was this ABC News analyst, Rebecca Jarvis, was on This Week with George Stephanopoulos talking about that, and they started with a clip of Ben Bernanke that you can see here.
Generally speaking, financial conditions are improving. The main drag or the main headwind to growth this year is, as you know, is the federal fiscal policy. You know, given that very heavy headwind, the fact that the economy is still moving ahead at least a moderate pace is indicative that the underlying factors are improving.
But Rebecca Jarvis, the Fed chairman, emphasized mostly good news.
Mostly good news.
Qualified good news, but boy, Wall Street didn't like it one bit. You saw a 500-point drop in 2 days.
And this is the irony, that Wall Street has become dependent on the Federal Reserve and its economic stimulus program. They've been pumping $85 billion into the markets, the overall economy, for more than 4 years now on a month-to-month basis. And those trillions of dollars, some on Wall Street are calling them a Hotel California, because you can check out, but you can't necessarily leave. You can never leave.
So I kind of like that Hotel California reference there, so I thought I would play that for you. Although the clip from Ben Bernanke at the beginning there, he was actually saying that the economy is being hurt by the sequester, by austerity, by budget cuts. So they didn't really discuss that so much in that clip, but I wanted to point that out as well. So that's almost all the clips I have to show you. I think, there is one other. When David Gregory, I showed that whole spat he was having with Glenn Greenwald, and I'm not sure exactly who I side with there. I mean, I kind of like some of the... I've seen David Gregory ask some tough questions in interviews, so he's not like a pusillanimous journalist who doesn't confront power. So I'm not sure I agree with what Glenn Greenwald was saying there. But on the other hand, there are things about David Gregory I find a little creepy and a little fake. And I want to show you one of his little things he said when he was going out to the commercial. And watch for the little wink at the end. If you want to know what I'm talking about when I say he's creepy, or he does some things that I think are kind of creepy, I'll show you this one last clip here.
We're going to break in here. I want to come back with our roundtable, talk about the immigration fight. Also, another big story this weekend, Paula Deen, her apology, what it means for her future after using racist language. We're back with our roundtable right after this.
I don't know. I don't know if you can see it as well as I could see it on my high-definition TV, but I thought that was definitely creepy. But I see I have like over 90 people, I think, watching at the moment, and those are all the clips I wanted to show you today, I think. Let me just double check. I don't think I missed any of my clips. I showed like all the great Glenn Greenwald ones, and yeah, I think that was... did I show the Dianne Feinstein one? I think I may have missed the Dianne Feinstein. I wanted to show you one more clip before I get to the discussion. There was something that... Dianne Feinstein said about why she thought that, or one of the implications of Edward Snowden going through Moscow, and she didn't quite make it clear, but I wanted to play it for you. Let's see, where is it? NSA, Dianne Feinstein. Let me just load this up real quick. Here's Dianne Feinstein talking about Edward Snowden going through Moscow.
Very big surprise. I had actually thought that China would see this as an opportunity to improve relations and extradite him to the United States. China clearly had a role in this, in my view. I don't think this was just Hong Kong without Chinese acquiescence. I think his choice of Moscow was interesting. I think what's interesting is that he was taken off in a car and his luggage in a separate car. I think it'll be very interesting to see what Moscow does with him.
So, yeah, the fact that his luggage was in a separate car, no one else really pointed that out, and she didn't really get more explicit than that. But I think what she's saying is, he has several laptops with him with all this secret intelligence information on there. Though hopefully that's his carry-on luggage, or I don't know, or actually as NSA systems administrator, you'd think he would do some encryption also. But I think what she was implying was that Russia may be looking at his, the Russian intelligence may be looking at his luggage as he stops off there in Moscow. And I'm not really sure that's true, but I wanted to play that for you because I thought that was sort of interesting analysis. And I see I've got a bunch of people here who have been watching live, and I've got like about 60 comments. I've been already going about an hour, but I don't really have much left to do tonight except to take the dog out to get myself some dinner. I think I'm going to get myself an In-N-Out burger as soon as I go through some of the questions here. Let me see if I can view all the comments. Hold on, let me get those queued up here. Oh, all you can see and hear me, I see that. Some nice positive things people are saying about me. You were right, Mike Rogers is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Thank you very much, Sean F. InfoDirt says USA is a country that wants to remain on the world stage. I think that was a comment in response to one of the clips about China wanting to be, Russia and Putin wanting to be on the world stage, I think. Rick Merrick asks, you see Glenn Greenwald on Howard Kurtz, new info about Snowden. I didn't watch reliable sources yet today, so I have not seen that, I'm sorry to say. And then Rick Merck says, watch this clip. Greg Greenwald says he has thousands of documents which, if published, would impose crippling damage on U.S. surveillance capabilities systems around the world. I haven't seen Greg Greenwald say that in the clips that I've watched so far, but he did say that Edward Snowden had gone to the Washington Post and the Guardian, and that they had sifted through what he had and had only released what they thought the American public needed to know, and not those things that the journalists at the Post and the Guardian thought would actually hurt national security. Let's see. Day Demott is saying 4th of July coming up with all these revelations. I'm not feeling too patriotic. And R.D. Cisna says, Jesus, they can make a court ruling secret. How could that even coexist with the democratic values of U.S. institutions? And I definitely agree with that. Sandy is barking off in the background. Sandy, come here. Sandy. Let's see. I enjoy, Andrew Blumenfeld says, I enjoyed your cat sound. I bet Sandy raised her head when she heard it too. Yeah, she did raise her head. I don't know what she's doing over there. Let's see. Rick Merck said Gregory revealed himself as a fascist. And then someone else said something about David Gregory. Simiel said David Gregory is useless, never asks the tough questions to those in power. Well, I've seen him ask some tough questions in interviews, both of Republicans and Democrats. I have this one. Well, I really enjoyed the questions he asked of Michelle Bachmann one Sunday, so I can't be too tough on him, but I guess that's asking tough questions of someone on the right. But I have seen him do some tough questions of people on the left. I have to say I do miss Tim Russert, though. Tim Russert was much better. I don't know about... He was definitely better, anyway. And Route 99 says, Gregory is a beltway tool, from his choice of guests to his posturing. The questions per se, that wasn't the problem. It was his tone and introduction. It was a textbook Fox News-style loaded question. Well, I don't know if it was as bad as Fox News, but I do take your point. And Datamon also asks, what are the charges facing James Clapper for lying to Congress? Well, none, of course, and I would like to see that. Lying to Congress has very difficult elements to prove, but what they're charging with the espionage that they're charging Edward Snowden with also has some difficult elements to prove, especially when you take the First Amendment defenses into account. So, I don't know. I think... I definitely take that point. And Super Nose says, once Crapper lies to Congress, any citizen knowing that is a lie must tell. So that, I guess, is a justification for Edward Snowden leaking after he saw what Clapper said, that clip I showed. So I do take all those points, and tilde. I'm not sure where tilde is from, but it says we need to stop treating the U.S. like an ally. I don't know. I have a lot. I think about 40% of my viewership is from non-U.S. People, so I'm not sure where tilde is from, but I don't know. I hope these latest revelations don't hurt the image of the United States too much, because I'm still I wouldn't say that 4th of July is coming up, as someone else said, and I like to still think there's some good values, and that maybe they're going to overcome some of what's been leaked. And like I said, my next video is going to be more about how it's not really Obama's fault alone, this NSA spying, that it's actually all three branches of government have to step it up. But it is kind of disconcerting to see some of this stuff go on, and I'll talk about that in more detail in my upcoming video. I'm glad to see so many people participating in the discussion here, and I do have to go out and get dinner, and I don't know where Sandy went. Sandy kind of left, and I have to keep an eye on her to make sure she doesn't do bad things in the living room that she's not supposed to. So I'm gonna wish you all a good end of your weekend and have a good upcoming week. I hope you enjoyed I think it was 23 or 24 clips I played for you, if you include the James Clapper clip from last March. So I hope it was educational. I hope you enjoyed the selections, and thank you for joining me for my Liberal Viewer Live Sunday Clip Roundup. I'm going to continue doing every Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific, doing my best to pick out the best, most provocative or most newsworthy clips I can find in the Sunday morning shows and a few other shows. So thanks for joining me, and look forward to my upcoming produced edited video on the NSA spying. I think it's going to be called Impeach Obama for NSA Spying ? And criticizing, as I've said before, the amazing atheist and some stuff I've seen on Fox News, and sort of discussing the whole issue in more depth. So I hope you enjoy that, and I'll be doing another Liberal Viewer Wednesday Live, just Q&A alone, where you can just ask questions on any topic, this Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. Pacific. I'll see you then, and see you around the internet. Thanks for joining me.